We're going to do our Light Eaters by Zoe Schlager reading for the day. I stopped on the end of page 20 before. I'm going to pick right back up. They say trying to understand any culture is like looking at an iceberg. There are vast depths you cannot see. I saw the world of botanists and their culture, ideas they worked with and built on, as more like a rhizomatic plant. From where I sat, printing out and rifling through the papers, I could see the shoots, the names, the concepts, but before long, one botanist implored me to speak with another, who would in turn direct me to another. I'm just going to read the dedication really quickly because I don't think I ever did that. I will double back and get to the prelude, the prologue, excuse me. Yeah. To Anne and Jeff, who see the big meanings in small things. And then there's a singular quote all by itself on the next page that says, "They can eat light. Isn't that enough?" Timothy Plowman, ethnobotanist. Networks of knowledge begin to emerge, the many unseen underground connections between labs and journals. Who trusted who and who didn't? Shoots and runners, shoots and runners. If you've never played that game, Shoots and Ladders, or Snakes and Ladders, it's kind of like that. Each time I called a scientist, I was reminded that most of them were utterly uninterested in yoking plants into human service. My best calls were with researchers totally in love with their subjects, the kind of love that you want to tell everybody about. Everyone, excuse me. Once convinced that I truly wished to know, they allowed themselves to unleash their volcanic enthusiasm. They told me about the corner of the world they themselves had just demystified, their own personal shard of the vast and chaotic puzzle of biology they had found by sifting with the finest sieve through the sediment of the world, turning it over in their hands, and through some mix of laborious years of reading and lab work and obsessive interest, had known what meaning it held, where to set it in its place. To see nature that way, I knew, was only a partial view. Nature is not a puzzle waiting to be put together or a codex waiting to be deciphered. Nature is chaos in motion. Biological life is a spiraling diffusion of possibilities, fractal in its profusion. Every organism, and certainly every plant, has ricocheted out of another fragment of the evolutionary web of green leafy things to variate further. These each are, of course, still morphing, because that sort of thing never ends, except in extinction. The multiplicity felt endless and impossible to grasp. The scientists I spoke with knew this, and they were trying anyway. It made me love them more. I began to learn what to say, or more accurately, not say, to keep a scientist on the phone. Plant sensing was generally fine, neutral territory. Plant behavior crept into more risky territory, and plant intelligence could be outright dangerous. Consciousness, I learned, must only bring up once consciousness, I learned, I must only bring up once. I'd made it through the crucible of each of these prior descriptions without feelings, and I might be hung up or scolded. When I hit on a trigger word, I sensed it immediately. The researcher became cautious, less open, especially if we were still in the dance of sussing each other out, when I knew that they were still deciding if they should be talking to me at all. But every so often, I'd feel the soft spot. Where there was give, there clearly had, excuse me, When I was actually reading this the first time around, I just fell apart. So I'm trying not to replicate that in this moment. Where there was give, where clearly they had their own curiosities about what behavior could mean or what might count as intelligence. They would thoughtfully consider my questions and, after some hesitation, give thoughtful answers. Often, this revealed inner conflicts. To many people I spoke to, intelligence felt dangerous, yet only because most people make a mental leap directly to human intelligence. Measuring plants against human cognition made no sense. It just rendered plants as lesser humans, lesser animals. Anthropomorphizing was dangerous because it diminished these green bodies, leaving no room for the recognition that plants deploy several senses, or could one say intelligences, that far exceeded anything humans could do in a similar category. Our versions of those senses, if we even have them, are paltry in comparison. It was hard for these researchers to talk about plant intelligence. They worried that it was a trap. I do want to just mention the Venus flytrap. It just comes to mind for me. If you've never read about it, it's a plant that can move fast enough to plant its teeth around a fly that is midair, leading to consciousness that did not represent the real wonder of what they'd learned. I'm going to finish page 22, and I know that these are really shorter segments than what I've read before, but I also want to be able to, first of all, eat lunch. It's about 3:13 p.m. right now. It'll be 3:14 in about 1 minute. And also, it's just a lot to mentally masticate on at one time. By now, it had been more than a year since I'd fallen into these questions. It was August 2019 in New York City, and the air was thick with the tang of heated garbage and pavement. Every day I exited my sweltering Flatbush apartment and walked the 6 blocks to Prospect Park. I sometimes stopped to buy a cold water coconut, a seed, or a few inches of sugarcane, a grass, from a man who sold them off a card table at the corner. When I stepped past the park's stone columns, I slowed down. The light darkened and the temperature dropped thanks to the exhale of millions of plants at once. I remembered that prior to the discovery of photosynthesis as a reaction to produce sugar, naturalists believed that its purpose was to serve as nature's air conditioner. The cool air settled on my skin. Let me repeat that. The cool air settled on my skin and I inhaled fully. It smelled like wet leaves, clean and head clearing. I now regarded the broadleaf plantain and chokeberry. No, I did not say artichoke, I said chokeberry, with a mix of awe and suspicion. I was newly aware that there was more going on in the lives of each plant I passed, both above ground and below, than I'd ever imagined. That they might well know I was walking by. Amid the wash of greens, bright and dingy, I began to see many distinct species, and exponentially more individuals. I knew they were high drama everywhere I looked, though I couldn't see it nor fully know the nature of it. I was regaining material intimacy with the natural world by looking at plants. It wasn't a way to ignore environmental catastrophe, it was a way to reattach myself to the stakes. Each plant was an embodied world we stood to lose. Every ecosystem, another galaxy. And if you remember what they said a few pages back, it was another galaxy and another galaxy and another galaxy, and so on and so on. Still, reading plant intelligence papers felt like trying to understand a mountain by looking through only a hand lens. The flurry of recent discoveries merely underlined that. Researchers had just found that plants could remember, but not where those memories were stored. They found kin recognition, not knowing how those kin were recognized. These discoveries were more like hints, fragments that pointed towards something larger, something whole. What was a plant? No one yet seemed to know. I decided on that walk to quit my job to think about plants full time. The newsroom where I worked had fallen on hard times. People were laid off as ad revenue dipped and investors got spooked. Morale sank through the floor. I could no longer see the point in my being there. I felt I could be dismissed at any time, so that even the security of full-time employment began to seem like a lie. I had some savings. I would downsize my life. It was time for a change. A childhood friend had room for me in the old farmhouse on the farm where he'd grown up, where he had run through rye fields as a kid. As kids, as children. I could situate myself there and then travel to see plants in more places, in their ancestral habitats, the places they'd evolved in. It would be worth it. Something clearly important was happening in botany. Science was approaching a precipice from which it couldn't possibly return. Our belief that plants are mute, unfeeling beings seemed to be wholly wrong. The moment felt ripe. It was a good story, too good to stay locked in the obscure realms of academia. I began to feel like it would or could change the world. Certainly, it was already changing mine. The stakes of the story began to feel much bigger than my own personal attraction to it. Or perhaps I thought they were one and the same. The more time I spent thinking about plants and the more I wanted to spend time thinking about plants, it felt abundantly good for me. I felt I could see everything more clearly. I walked back home and looked up at the gigantic golden pathos hanging in my kitchen window. All of its leaves were upright. They had all swiveled to face the window pane since I'd been gone, practically plastering themselves to it. I glanced around at my other houseplants. The philodendron was now poking a slender brown aerial root into the potted jade beside it. I looked at my rubber plant, which was a cutting from my father's rubber plant, which was itself a cutting from this parent's rubber plant, which had been a gift on their wedding day 60 years before. I don't know why I'm stuttering so much. I think too much when I'm reading sometimes. I don't know if that happens to y'all. I looked at my rubber plant, which was a cutting from my father's rubber plant, which itself was a cutting from his parents' rubber plant, which had been a gift on their wedding day 60 years before. That original plant, now a formidable tree, still sat by the grand piano in their living room, lording over the scene. It once nearly died. My grandmother's mother lopped off its surviving branch, soaked its blunt end in water until white roots slithered out, and coaxed its complete regrowth from that single healthy limb. 4 generations of my family had handled this plant, and here it is. Here it still was, silently building new body parts. Wasn't that kind of a memory in itself? It had become unbearable not to understand. I had to go out and see for myself. So actually, we're ending on chapter 2, which is page 25. And we'll get back to the tarot in a moment. All right. So pages 20 through 25. I'm going to use the Eye of Ra deck I'm just going to utilize the Eye of Ra. We'll see what comes out. Let's get 3 for the reading and then 1 overriding. 1 overarching. one overstanding. Overstanding meaning, comprehension. So we've got transmute in the reverse. We've got butterfly in the upside down. I'm just going to show you the bottom of the deck while I'm reading. I think what this means is that you can't cross a butterfly. You cannot, if you hold a butterfly in your hands, they were talking about the rubber tree, how it had been in 3 different generations of one family. If you take that rubber tree and you replant it, but you do nothing to resuscitate it, it dies. That specific offshoot dies, right? It's kind of like activities that we've got in our own life, confirmation, or I told you lunch was about to be ready, or there's a portion of self that you constantly have to prune, that we're always cutting ourselves back from, that we're always limiting ourselves, not on purpose, but just because ourselves are our greatest fear. So when we dream big, or when we replant or repot part of ourselves, if you're holding a butterfly in your hands or a bee, they will remain in your hand. I'm just hearing the snake sound. Intentionally, right? But as soon as you try to capture them, shut your hands around them, or smash them in any way, there's an automatic necessity for the butterfly to die, because you've now touched the powder on their wings, or for the bee to sting you. The second card out. You cannot secretly crush something that has been laboriously built with a lot of labor. On Labor Day, we celebrate specific portions and pieces of this world that have not been acknowledged during any other day of the year. They've not ever been recognized. They've never been seen before. It's addressing the shadow portion of industry. It's the infrastructure. It is the software. It's the hardware of who we are as humans. They said that for plants, nobody really knows where their memory comes from, where it stems from, where it's stored. Same thing when it comes to the seed of the soul for human beings, or for the seed of your spirit. Where does that emit from? Where's the source energy? Where does it begin? And the truth is that it's hard work. You can't just cross over or slither over someone else's hard work that they've built by themselves. That's been a burden on their back without being automatically seen. I'll just let this be seen. Be seen. For all the light that I don't necessarily see in my own melanin within the family I was raised with, the family that I created, and the family that I was raised in have both built what is either seen or unseen, because half the pyramid is submerged. I've been a burden, quote unquote, on both sides. And because of that, when I adopt this spirit of understanding, or attempting to translate for the rest of the world, or for myself even, honestly, the spaces between those two establishments, because they each have their own establishment. Admittedly, one is more prone to pyramids than the other. The other is more hunter-gatherer. The constant is always going to be the plants, the animals, and the water. Those are the things I can bank on because of the nature of this earth, this planet, and grounding myself in such allows me to transmute the energy so that it is no longer a burden. It is no longer a problem. And it is no longer a beginning point for us to build more problems or for us to seek more burdens upon ourselves. I was a burden to my birth mother. That's neither here nor there, but I am also the building that my adoptive mother has spiritually poured into. I've grown from that system of roots on both sides, whether I want to or not. This knowledge of storage location is not the point. The point is to recognize, absolutely exalt, as well as appreciate the things that we've invested in and the path that we've walked. If you've never heard the story of beaches, it's about a man on a beach walking along, picking up starfish and throwing them back into the water, one at a time. And this other guy comes up to him and says, "You do realize that there's miles of beaches full of washed up sand, creatures, fish, whales. You're not going to be able to save all of them." And instead of losing his belief or his spirit or his trajectory in life, the man says, well, picks up one of them and says, "I just saved that one." That made a difference in that one's life. Same thing goes for the story of walking on a beach with Jesus. I don't really care what religion you are. You can choose to say Allah, you can choose to say Moses, you can choose to say Ganesh, Shiva, Vishnu, Kali. There are going to be moments that you don't feel strong enough to believe in your own spiritual origin, that you may question it, whether you can get across to the other side. It may be a river, a stream, maybe an ocean or a sea. It does not matter. Saying those 4 different things, river, ocean, sea, and what did I say? Stream. It's kind of like saying Jesus, God, Christ, and Lord. It's the effort put into building yourself, your stamina, your abilities to the point where you're able to water somebody else's garden, whether or not they asked you to or not. So on the beach, when you see, there's a story of a man walking on a beach, and he looks down and sees God's footprints walking beside him, or Jesus, or whatever entity you'd like to say. And he says, "God, why did you leave me? Because at some points I see there was only one set of footprints." And God says, "My child, those were the moments that I picked you up and carried you. Understand that sometimes crossing is not such a burden as what you might think, and that you're never alone. There's a plethora of flora, bacteria, etc. in the ocean, in the seas, in the rivers, across the face of this earth, in the sky. You can see ethereal bodies all around you. You can just watch a bird fly. That's the point. Find some way to decipher that the area of your ability to store that information is not limited to one source, but that you could draw on all of them at one time if you so please.